Joining us now, the #2 Republican in the House, Congressman Steve Scalise. And Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning, Chris. Great to be back with you.
So, the Electoral College votes tomorrow. When the electors, 270 of them, vote in favor of Joe Biden and he becomes the president-elect, will you stop contesting this election?
Well, Chris, look, there's been a lot of contesting of the election in multiple states. The president's done it. Other groups have done it, too. And that's because of the concerns people had. When you look at massive vote swings days and weeks after the election, millions of people feel very frustrated with this process. And look, there's going to ultimately be a conclusion to this. But for now, I think if you just discount the fact that millions of people wonder why is it that in some states, Florida, Texas, large states, they had the results by 10 o'clock that night. And then in other states, it was days and weeks. And during those days and weeks, you saw massive vote swings that just seed a lot of distrust. That's got to get resolved. We've got to start getting back to the point where we can resolve our elections on the night.
Congressman Scalise,
yeah.
The reason that there were these vote swings was because in a lot of states they weren't able to count the millions of mail-in ballots until election night. And everybody knew that, and in fact it happened. In Florida, it went the other way. They were able to count the mail-in ballots early, so it favored Biden early, and then it swung to Trump. In Pennsylvania, they had to count the mail-in ballots late, so it started pro-Trump, and then it swung to Biden. I mean, let me put it this way. The Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, appointed by Donald Trump, said he had his federal investigators go out. There was no vote fraud.
Well, Chris, first of all, you look at New York, right? The Claudia Tenney race in New York, she's up by 12 votes. Just the other day, they found 55 votes in a desk drawer. You know, this kind of stuff, people look at this and go, what is going on? This is the United States of America. It's not Venezuela. That's what gets people irate. You know, why is this still going on? Let's have a chain of custody. Let's get back to making sure that everybody can have full confidence in our elections. But just to look the other way and say, hey, look, you know, 3 weeks later, they pulled the corner. Like, people are very frustrated with this. There's still an election in Georgia on January 5th, and 3 weeks from now, we need to encourage people to go back out, but also to have a system where there's going to be more confidence than what they saw back in November.
But, you know, there have been dozens of lawsuits, and they've been rejected by state courts, by federal courts, by judges appointed by Donald Trump. And on Friday night, the Supreme Court threw out a lawsuit that was brought by the Attorney General of Texas and a number of other attorney generals. 126 Republicans in the House, including you, sir, signed on to that lawsuit. The Supreme Court threw it out without even listening to it. This was a lawsuit that was going to throw out the votes in 4 swing states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I mean, you were talking about disenfranchising the 10 million Biden voters who supported the president-elect in those 4 states. Do you feel comfortable throwing out millions of votes of your fellow Americans?
Well, nobody wants any votes thrown out, Chris. And in fact, the 70+ million votes that are also at stake for President Trump. Well, no, if you look at the Texas lawsuit, what it was saying is there are some states that didn't follow the laws that were on their books. The Constitution is very clear that it's state legislatures that set the process for having electors.
With all
some
due respect,
Secretary
sir,
of State changed those rules.
The Supreme Court threw that out. They didn't even hear it.
The Supreme Court said they weren't going to take the case. They said Texas didn't have standing. They said Texas didn't have standing. They didn't say they were going to address the merits. Look, the Supreme Court, I think a lot of people know, didn't want to be anywhere near this court. They don't like getting in the middle of disputes between other branches of government. And that's just something they've done throughout history.
So bottom line, even though the electors on tomorrow are more than 270 of them are going to say that Joe Biden is the next president of the United States, you're not willing to recognize him as the president-elect, and you're not willing to stop contesting this election.
Well, hold on, Chris. First of all, Joe Biden has been going through a transition that even President Trump supported, while he's also following what the court allows. There are legal challenges allowed. Nobody said back during Bush v. Gore, prior to the Supreme Court finally resolving it, and ultimately there was electors met. There was a swearing in. Nobody disputed that, maybe some on the Democrat side, but you didn't see people asked prior to that to pass judgment before it was fully resolved. Let the legal process play out. But if you want to restore trust by millions of people who are still very frustrated and angry about what happened, that's why you've got to have this whole system play out. There will be a president sworn in on January 20th. But let's let this legal process play itself out.
All right. Let me switch to another subject. We learned this week that the Justice Department is investigating the president-elect's son, Hunter Biden, for his financial dealings with foreign countries. We also learned this week that Attorney General Barr knew, of course, about this investigation and decided to keep it secret before the election in conformance with Justice Department guidelines not to interfere in an election. Do you think Barr was right to do that?
Look, again, this is one of those things that sows more distrust. You know, President Trump was laying this out. A New York Post, this was the infamous New York Post front page story that Twitter blocked because Twitter said it wasn't valid. I think you yourself even said you expressed concern about this story. Many in the mainstream media were mocking people who were putting this story out there, and it turns out, looks like it was true. And again, this is something that's very serious. We need, and I think people deserve answers.
Sir, we don't know. We don't know if anything's true or not. We just know that there's an investigation going on. Let me ask you a different question.
But even what President, yeah, but that was being laid out, and that's where Twitter blocked even this story by the New York Post.
I never blocked it. I reported on it.
No, Twitter did.
I just said we need. Yeah, I understand. Here's what President-elect Biden says about the Department of Justice and his administration.
It's not my Justice Department, it's the People's Justice Department. So the persons I pick to run that department are going to be people who are going to have the independent capacity to decide who gets prosecuted and who doesn't.
Do you trust Joe Biden, excuse me, to continue this investigation when he becomes president and his attorney general is in charge after January 20th, to continue the investigation of his son?
Well, I'm sure whoever would be put up for Attorney General would be heavily scrutinized by the United States Senate. That is the advise and consent role that they would play. But again, these are concerns that were laid out during the campaign, including yourself. Other people in the media expressed concerns about that story, and Twitter blocked the distribution of the story. And it turns out there's a lot of merit to it. Whether it's completely true or not, we're going to find out. But it's being much more widely reported now after the election. And it's another reason that people have real distrust in the mainstream media.
Again, just quickly, one of the people who didn't report that story was Attorney General Barr, who purposely kept the investigation quiet. Do you blame him for doing that?
Well, again, it's very frustrating, and I'd love to hear his reason why, but at the same time, you know, you see a lot of these things that are going on, and the president was talking about them. Other people were talking about it, too. But then, for various reasons, you saw the mainstream media who would block the distribution of those stories.
Okay, finally, there's a lot on the plate here. Congressman Eric Swalwell, who was warned by federal investigators back in 2015 about his association with Christine Fong, a woman who raised money for him, and he was warned that she was allegedly a Chinese spy. Here's what your House Leader, Kevin McCarthy, said about that this week.
This man should not be in the Intel Committee. He's jeopardizing national security. What is being said in those meetings inside the SCIF that we don't want other people to hear or listen?
Final question. I got less than a minute left, Congressman. Do House Republican leader McCarthy or you have any evidence, hard evidence, that Eric Swalwell did anything wrong in his relationship with this woman, knew that she was a spy before he was warned about it, and ever gave her sensitive information?
Well, Chris, these are questions that Eric Swalwell himself needs to answer. And Speaker Pelosi, did she know about this before she put him on the House Intelligence Committee? He got on there in just his second term. That's not common. You look at all of the relationships with the Chinese spies in the Bay Area, going back to Dianne Feinstein as well. Why did this happen? Why, by the way, did Speaker Pelosi block what Kevin McCarthy and a lot of us were working on in a bipartisan way to get a Chinese task force? She was initially supporting it, and ultimately she pulled back and blocked the Chinese task force that was looking into activities by China. So there are a lot of very serious questions to be raised. But at a minimum, and I agree with our leader, Kevin McCarthy, Eric Swalwell should not be on the House Intelligence Committee. And we need some answers now that they, for whatever reason, are hiding. They're very quick to go to the microphone and accuse others of being Russian spies. Turned out they were the ones that were associating with Chinese spies. This is a real alarming revelation that just came out.
Congressman Scalise, thank you. Thanks for coming in, sir. Always good to talk with you.
Great to be back with you, Chris. Thanks.